MD Ware. Let's talk about some coronavirus stuff.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want to talk about coronavirus stuff,
No.
but I kind of feel like I have to. You know what I mean? It's gotten bad in Texas. It was like
it's gotten bad everywhere.
It was 72,000 cases yesterday, I believe was the number, which is like the highest it's been as a daily, like this entire time. Like we started this 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know. That's the crazy thing, right? Is it feels like we've already been through this, you know, and it's still not over. It's killing us. And like in the healthcare world, you know, I obviously work with a lot of, you know, I work in the hospital and all that stuff.
Right.
We're just like getting crushed. And I mean, it's a little bit different from the States because here we have universal healthcare. So nobody has to go bankrupt to pay for their necessary cancer surgery or whatever. But, you know, now we can't bring patients in to take out their cancers because if they need an ICU bed, there are none to be had.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. If something goes wrong and they need a higher level of care, can't do that. And you can't do any major operations, right? Because there's not enough people to care for them. And so it's like we're having a really hard time dealing with it, but also the patients are having a really hard time dealing with it because now there's people who maybe, you know, they have like a colon cancer or something. Right. Would have been fine, but COVID. And so they never had their surgery and their cancer progressed and now they have like incurable disease, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So in your work environment, are you seeing people talk in ways about the virus that go to like a conspiracy level? Are you seeing that with your coworkers or with patients and stuff? Are people actively mentioning that to you?
So there are patients, they usually will not disclose that that level that to us, sense. Right? They'll just say like no, or I'll think about it or whatever.
Yeah.
And like frankly, someone in my position, you know, I have a very specific job, right? I'm there to like do an operation or whatever, treat a specific thing. But if I were their family doctor, that would be something I'd have to unpack, right? There's almost no controversy or conspiracy or whatever among physicians.
Yeah.
I know there is a population of nurses where it's significant. And there's a lot of animosity between the majority of the nursing profession who are behind vaccination and the minority who are against it. And that tension is just making things worse.
So this is so crazy because I feel like we talked about this a few weeks ago. But I've noticed this trend too, where if you look at a lot of these websites that are trying to interview quote unquote professionals, because they're trying to get that quote about how, the vaccine is a scam and all this stuff. They tend to be nurses. That seems to be the medical qualification that I'm seeing there. And I why is that? What is there something about that level of education that's just, is there a hierarchy?
I could speculate, but I think maybe the biggest thing is that there's different levels of nurses.
Yeah.
There's like a registered nurse. There's an RPN, which is like a registered practical nurse. I think there's different designations and they imply different levels of education. But what you might call the lowest level of education is a very like practical education, right? So there's not a lot of class stuff. There's not a lot of fundamental science. And it's mostly on-the-job learning, which makes you great at doing the things that you're trained to do, right? It's how you train to be a surgeon. You don't sit in a classroom. You do some of that and you study, but a lot of the learning is done hands-on. And so I think that it's those type of nurses, those nurses with that level of training who are most into the conspiracy stuff because they come from an educational background where they're not looking at evidence. They're not looking at science. They're just looking at what the person who taught them would do. And so I think they're getting a lot of their information, their epistemology is very, they said this and this person said this. And so it's a lot more anecdotal in nature than the scientific training that is sort of standard in medical school, and that training pathway, and the registered nurses, and I guess you'd say like university trained nursing cohort.
That's so interesting. I have a lot of family that work in healthcare, and I told this story on the Discord. I don't think I told this live on air, but I had a family member who a nurse on their team actually sent a letter in and quit because they didn't want to get the vaccine, because they were required to get the vaccine, and said that they weren't going to do it for religious reasons, and then ended up getting hospitalized, that person and their husband both at that same facility, which is just surreal to hear about. And this is just, obviously, I'm hearing this from one family member. I can't imagine what's happening across the country. I'm sure there's there's probably one or two people at all these workplaces who are probably thinking like similar things, right? Or at least are somewhat doubtful, or have,
So at my institution, there was a huge cohort, a relatively like small percentage, but a large number of nurses who were not compliant with the vaccine policy of the institution, and they had their employment terminated. They had like months or whatever to get the vaccine, and they refused. Finally, they had their employment terminated, and they went and they opened up a non-vaccinated clinic of their own. So they would try their whole marketing scheme was to say, we're unvaccinated, and we're not going to discriminate against our patients for being unvaccinated. Which implies, of course, that the hospitals are discriminating against patients who are not vaccinated, which is not true, right? Like if you come into the hospital with like, a medical problem, then we're going to treat you regardless. So it's not like we're discriminating, but they're weaponizing that whole movement.
Oh my gosh. This is so wild. So wild.
Very frustrating from this side of things. But
yeah, I mean, who would have thought, like, the anti-vax movement used to be such a small minority, or at least not a very vocal one. And now it has grown so much. It is bigger than it has ever been, at least in recent history. I know historically vaccines haven't always been accepted by the general public, but like this is just so weird to see as a movement, like a real political movement that is happening, and just very frustrating. And I don't know, everybody's asking, I feel like I read this New York Times columnist post today saying like America is falling apart, I think was the title, and the conclusion of this column was like, I don't know what's happening, and I don't know how to fix this. Like, that's literally how the article ended. It's just like, I don't read columns from you, New York Times, for you to like tell me that you don't know things. Like, I want to know
just
some
throwing
answers.
up their hands.
You just literally just throwing up your hands. It's like, I feel like that's such a common feeling right now with everybody. Nobody really knows what to do with this situation, and it's just it feels very hopeless. But maybe we can generate a sense of hope today.